Hey, everybody, welcome to our Labor Day evening, 6 o'clock devotion. It's good to be back with you after having Sam sit in the seat for a week. Our standard rule is if you preach that Sunday, you'll do the devotions next week because we're trying to take the devotions in the direction of teaching. And that was, it's kind of where we were headed anyway with the each night of the devotion, I and now Sam we tend to try to take some of the information that we learned and some of the stuff that we have material from sermon prep that we didn't get to preach on because we only have about 20-25 minutes in the actual sermon to go greater in depth, to take a deeper dive. So this week we're going to be looking at the story of Esther and Mordecai. But tonight I wanted to do something just a little bit different. It is Labor Day. And I wanted us to think a little bit about Labor Day. It's a great day when we all get an extra day on the weekend. A lot of people go to the lake or the beach. Maybe you did something fun with the fam. We're smoking ribs and pork chops, fixing to have a great supper and get ready for school tomorrow. And everything starts back tomorrow. Labor Day is a holiday first created to celebrate the working man, pushed forward by labor or trade unions early in the century, to give the working man a day off and to celebrate workers, people that may not always get celebrated, people that make our country run, that make things happen, on whose backs our country labors and grows and does all the great things. My dad was in a union when he was a younger man. He was in the machinist union and was a firm believer in it. Later years, he got a little more jaded towards it because the company ended up shutting down, or he ended up losing his job because of some wage issues and layoffs around that. But I wanted us to think about the importance of the guys and the girls that work every day that make our country run. The people that actually make America function. And as important as Wall Street and bankers and politicians, and that people that we will vote for this fall or not vote for, or people will vote against, or people in the apparatchik of government are for functioning, far more important are the guys that drive our trucks, ladies that work in factories and on assembly lines, nurses that go to work 12 hours a day, 3 to 4 days a week, those that fix our plumbing, repair our electrical systems, that work on the lines for North Central and Entergy, that leave their families for weeks on end when there's disasters to go and help people get their power back. For the guys that work in the grocery store, stock the meat, for the butchers, for the bakers, for the meat processors and the packers, for all of those that make things happen. They are important. And I can't stress enough how much we need to value that. I'm college educated, have a master's degree in divinity. I have an undergraduate degree in engineering, and I have a law degree, a Juris Doctorate. I'm educated beyond my station in life and beyond my upbringing. But I don't want us to miss the fact that it is oftentimes the unheralded worker on which we all depend. And I think we've become a little more aware of this during COVID, during the toilet paper shortages, the hamburger shortages, the Lysol spray shortages. And this week I discovered that you can't get Hungry Man pancake syrup anywhere That's a new shortage that strikes near and dear to my children's heart. Thank God for log cabin. All of this to say, we all work somewhere, or most of us do, or we did and are retired. We all have put in a day's work and have struggled to make the bills match the incoming. And oftentimes we in clergy circles think what we do is the most vital. It is important in that it is important because the gravity of what we do in the eternal. I once heard a story of a 4-star general that flew on a plane next to Billy Graham, and they had a long conversation. And the general was very nice and cordial, but he made a statement. He said, you're lucky that, lives are not on the line with the decisions you make. Billy Graham, and Billy Graham said, oh, but they are. More so than even yours, because if all of my decisions only affected where somebody lived or dies, well, that would be one thing. But what we do affects their eternal destination. And that's important. But I want you to hear me say this, is that God calls each and every one of us to be that minister. That in our working, if we're working at Walmart, or if we're working building bridges, or really big skyscrapers, or stocking the shelves at the grocery store, whatever we're doing, we are still, every place we are called to be ministers. There's some of us that do it full time as a vocation, to order the church, to serve the sacraments, to make theological study our life's pursuit. But everyone is a minister. And everyone has a job to do in the kingdom. No greater, no lesser. Colossians 3:23 says this, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. I try to teach my kids that. I want them to grow up with the work ethic that Lawrence Sparks and Patty Sparks impressed upon me. Whatever you do it to your utmost. Work as hard as you can at it. Give it your best, 110%. That will give testimony to God himself in your life. And you will have opportunities to share your faith. I'll never forget the time that I was in a small grocery store in a small town. And I heard a conversation between an older stocker, an older gentleman, probably in his late 60s, that had probably been working at that grocery store most of his life, talking with a young teenage, probably 17, 18-year-old teenager that was working for him. And I heard him quote that scripture. And he was witnessing to that young man about his faith while he was teaching him how to put cereal on a shelf. Think about the people that I worked for when I was at Mitchell, Vogie, Beasley, and Corbin and Tupelo, and the incredible people that I worked for when I was practicing law. Pete Mitchell was the senior partner. He's old, ancient, even by our standards. When I came to work for him, I think he was in his 70s, still practicing law, still sharp as a tack. I remember Bill Beasley, my boss. I remember Steve Corbin, Dennis Vogie. I remember all of those guys and their testimony to me, and the way they led their lives was a testimony to me. Including the lady that ran the office for us, who was a proud member of First United Methodist Church, Nettleton, Mississippi. But I remember that the Franklin Graham Crusade was coming to town, and they asked Bill Beasley to be the director over facilities, like to take up that as a volunteer position. It really needed to be a lawyer to negotiate with Tupelo Coliseum. And he just didn't have time. He was working on leading the aquatics program at Tupelo as a volunteer, helping with that and raising money for that. Just didn't have the time. And so the firm looked at the folks that was leading this, which was basically the Community Development Foundation folks, and said, look, Sparks will do it. And as a wet behind the ears, fresh out of law school, law student, they asked me to do that, and I did. And when the crusade came to town, they gave me a week off from work and said, don't show up, go do this. I mean, their testimony to their faith. Mr. Pete started it and led it. Bill, just incredible in asking me and letting me do that. I worked as a youth director part-time while I was practicing law, and they completely were okay with that. I eventually left and ended up in ministry full-time. Mr. Pete, when he passed away, made a huge endowment to First Methodist Church Tupelo. And Bill Beasley, although in another firm now, still leads at First Methodist Tupelo in that way. I got the joy when I came back to Tupelo as associate pastor of serving Bill Holy Communion. A good man who taught me so much. I want to say for us today that we need to look at the people that influence us, the men and women that showed us how to lead and lead well, and showed us how to be good Christians in the workplace, in our daily lives, that taught us that there is a spirit of Labor Day, and that whatever we do, work at it with all our heart as if we work for the Lord. I know they're hard bosses to work for. I know there's tough working circumstances. But I also know that we don't do it for them. We do it for the Lord. My sister-in-law, Amanda, worked at the depot in Richmond, Kentucky, but she also did odd jobs and just did stuff to help out. And one day I was leaving Richmond First Methodist, and Amanda was weed eating a vacant field, which the city was threatening to find, owned by the church, that the city was threatening to fine us for if we didn't get cleaned up. And she was out there weed eating that field. And I pulled up next to her and I said, Amanda, what are you doing? And she said, weed eating for the Lord. It's stuck with me ever since. On this Labor Day, let us redouble our efforts in all that we do. I know it's crazy in America right now. I know it's crazy at work, and I know that there's so much going on with COVID. But let us take today and redouble our efforts. To whatever we do, work at it with all our heart, as working for the Lord and not for the human masters. Let us see ourselves as instruments in God's mission on this earth, and as ministers of the gospel. You never know who you may touch in a deep and profound way, just by the witness of your life. I hope this Labor Day finds you well. I hope you've had a moment to pause and rest and reflect. Spend time with your family. And tomorrow, when we all go back to work, let us do what we do for the Lord. Thanks for being with us tonight. Know God loves you. Know I love you. We will see you back here tomorrow night. And if you want to read ahead, read a little bit of Esther, and we're going to really take a deep dive on Mordecai tomorrow night. We'll see you then.